Welcome to part 2 of my rugged radio install mini-series. In the previous video I went over all the equipment I was going to be installing into my RZR, or at least most of it, and kind of the basic functions of each. And I mentioned that in part 2 we were going to begin installation. What I'm going to do in this video is go over installing the radios into the dash and the intercom. Part 3 will actually be the helmet kit and then trying everything out and doing a demonstration of it. I will say that I've gone ahead and ran all the wires for everything we're going to be using in this video. The reason for that is, quite honestly, because this was all pretty new to me. So I wanted to take my time to try different things and see how everything, where I wanted to run it and where I thought it would work best for my installation. I got a couple tips from some of the rugged radio techs directly on the phone. So what I'll do is go over each one of these wires and explain their function and the reason I ran them the way I did and where they're supposed to be going, what they do, and etc. So, alright, without further ado, let's get this started. Let's kick things off with the antenna. You might have seen me playing with this thing in the previous video, but if not, I'll go over it anyway. It doesn't come with this little spring. What this is for, to allow the antenna to bend down out of the way from tree branches or other low-hanging objects that might be passing under out on the trails. To install this, you just have to, there's a couple of set screws on the original connector. You loosen those and the antenna will slide out the top. Then you remove the connector, screw the spring down onto the base here, stick the antenna back in it, and tighten down the set screws. Make sure everything's getting snug, because these machines vibrate a little bit and you don't want it just falling off on the trail somewhere and maybe you didn't, or nobody saw it, and I don't know if you'd ever see it again after that. But anyway, these antennas are pre-cut to length for the majority of the frequencies that these radios will be using. Rugged does sell a little meter you can use to fine-tune the antenna length specifically to the channel you're going to be using, but I'm just going to use the overall setting. Let's go below and we'll look at how I mounted it. Well, here's the underside of that antenna mount. Pretty standard little unit here. The reason I put it here is, number one, I wanted it near a bar so I could run the wire without having it just hanging across the roof here. Also, this is a Polaris aluminum roof, which makes a great material for the ground plane for the antenna itself. But right here there was a little center mark already in the roof itself, so I just took a 3/8 bit and drilled the hole straight up through it. I mounted the antenna and tightened everything down. I also took a Dremel tool and sanded down a little bit of the powder coating right up under this bracket so that it would make direct contact with the metal for the roof. Now, if you have a plastic roof or you're unable to mount it to metal in such a way, they do sell a ground strap, which is it's just a wire with a couple of ring terminals on it, but it would go between your mounting surface and this metal clamp here, and then you would attach it to like the roll bar of your vehicle, or preferably on a bolt or something. You don't want to put unnecessary holes into your roll bar, but if you can get a ring terminal that can go behind like one of these bolts here or to a non-critical area, that'd be your best bet. But the antenna does have to be grounded to the vehicle. The metal roof is the best solution, but if that's not a possibility, then use a ground strap. And now, as far as running the antenna wire, I just went along the top of the roll bar here, went through the straps of my overhead bag, zip tied it where I need to. The clamp that holds the roof down is actually going to catch the wires right in its little opening here where the clamp wraps around this bar, hold everything in place. I went into this pre-existing hole in the roll bar from the factory, down the roll bar, and then across under the dash, and then right out to here. Alright, now the reason I ran it this way instead of under the vehicle or anything else is because this wire is supposed to stay away from all power sources like 12-volt power cables or anything of the sort. Also, it is extremely important not to coil the excess cable coming from this antenna and just like zip tying it up under the dash or wherever you may have it. The ideal solution is to cut this cable and install a new connector like I've done here. Rugged has a video on their site showing you exactly how to do that, and that is the best solution. If you don't want to do that or feel you may not be able to, you're supposed to route the cable an extra length around the vehicle to get back to this location, but you absolutely must not coil this cable up. Here's a quick picture of what can happen if you do that. Now in this picture, what you're looking at is a vehicle that was at King of the Hammers here just a few weeks ago. Pulled up to the Rugged booth, said they were having trouble with their antenna, or their radio, and the techs went over to take a look at it, and sure enough there was a coiled up radio antenna that's been zip tied, and right where it was zip tied together you can see that the cable actually melted. The cable apparently being coiled like this actually created a coil, and with the antenna picking up so many waves coming from all the other radios plus just every single wave there is in the atmosphere, it just generated enough heat to melt that cable, and that could have easily caused a fire and caught that vehicle on fire. So luckily it was caught before that happened. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about the little push-to-talk buttons. These will allow you, when you're using a helmet kit, you can use these push-to-talks to turn on the transmit function of the radio, so you can just speak and broadcast without having to use the microphone or any other method. This is one for the passenger side. I actually put it right here on this grab handle. Seemed like a pretty good spot because she's actually not going to be using this a whole lot, but in case she needs it, or if I'm out of the vehicle and she's still in here, she needs to speak with me over the handheld, she can just use this to get my attention. What I did is just drilled a little 1/2-inch hole right here through the dash and ran the wire through there. I got it coiled up. There's a little bit of extra, so if I need to pull this in or out, I can just slide this zip tie up and move the bar in and feed the extra back into the dash and make adjustments as needed. Or if I want to pull this out, I can just unstrap this and slide the bar out and slide the zip tie off the end of it and get it out of the way. For mine, usually these are supposed to go on the steering wheel, but in a race and you need, instant access to your crew or trackside, that's absolutely the best solution. But our pace is a little more leisure, so I actually decided to put it down here on the shifter. You can just stick your hand down here and squeeze that button just like you would a trigger on a joystick or something. Put a little notch here in the rubber boot and ran the cable down through it. The spring cable actually allows this to rotate around the steering column back and forth without getting tangled up. But it works just fine down there too. I even left a little pigtail sticking up so that this has a little bit of play up here. I actually zip tied it right to the pivot point, so this wire is not going to be traveling back and forth with the shifter. This is where it's going to be tied on, and all this does is rotate, so there's really not going to be any motion here much at all. And I just ran this wire along with all the others. These are my winch cables, the power wire that feeds the bus under the hood, and I just ran this push to talk button right out with the winch cables and back in through the grommet and the firewall. It came right out here in the dash. This is it here. This is the one for the passenger side, and they connect on the back of the intercom. And now let's talk about the comm wires that go to the wired kits that's going to be in our helmets. This is the connector for it. It's a pretty heavy duty deal here. They've got another equally heavy duty plug that comes off the end of the helmet kit that basically seals this off to keep water and mud and everything else out of it when it's plugged in, obviously. What I did is I have this ran from the dash. This two out of these three. Let's see, it's these two here. One for the passenger, one for the driver. We'll just go over the driver's side. The passenger is identical. But I went across the dash, right up into this hole in the bottom end of the roll bar here, where like the light bar wires and speaker wires would come up. Went through the roll bar, came out here, went right across the top, just like I did on the other side. Actually zip tied it to the inside of this bar, and then left some slack on this end. So when not in use, I can just feed it right through the loops in my seat here and let it hang, keep it from getting caught in the doors or feed or whatever else. Get ready to use it, I'll just pull it out, put my straps on, hook it up to my helmet, and then I got enough play here to move around this area of the vehicle without getting, you know, the cord too tight or anything like that. Alright, so the last wires we need to talk about right now are the 12 volt and ground leads for the radio and intercom itself. This is the one for the intercom, this is the one for the radio. Now Rugged stresses that the radio absolutely needs to be connected directly to the battery, but the intercom does not. I actually have it tied in to the little bus under the hood. Let's go take a look at that. For the leads for the intercom, I just brought out and tied into the little bus strip here. These are the cables coming from the battery that power not only this bus but the winch mainly. That's what these were for, and they came with that kit. But with the radio running directly off the battery, that means it's going to operate even without the key in the vehicle, which is something you may need, you know, in case of emergency. So the intercom I also hooked up directly to 12 volt power instead of switch power. That way it can also operate without the key being even in the vehicle. So this is where those are tied in. Now the radio leads, I ran down, followed the bundle of wires here from the winch cables, also my rock lights and everything else that I've ran through here, all tied to those. And they went straight down to the bottom and under the center console inside. Well, here's a view from inside. This is where they come. I just zip tied them all together. This is that push to talk wire here, winch cables, rock light wires. These are the power 12 volt and ground leads for the radio. Just followed this path that the winch cables took that are suggested by the factory, and then connected directly to the battery. A couple things to note here. I did actually have to extend these cables. The ones that came in the kit were not long enough for this 4-seater. They may be long enough for a 2-seater. I can't really say, I don't have one, or at least not one that I'm working on. But what I did is cut the wires in toward the middle, but I left the end with the fuse blocks to put on that end of the battery where they're supposed to go. Then I extended them from here up to here to make them long enough. I did mention this to Rugged, and they are aware of it, and said they are working on a solution to keep people from having to extend these leads. One other note I need to make about the 12 volt leads here feeding the radio is, just like Rugged says, it is imperative that you connect or do not coil your antenna wire. It is also imperative that you hook the 12 volt and ground straight to your battery. If you don't, you could end up with what's called a ground loop that can cause some severe interference with your radio system. So just go ahead and do like they say and run them straight to the battery. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get ready to install this in-dash bracket here, hold the radio and the intercom together. This is where the little dry box would go normally. You take the dash loose and set it back, and there's a screw you can reach right down here. Take it out and that little box comes out pretty easy. Hopefully I got enough light on this for you and you see what I'm doing here, but we'll get our wires out of the way. This bracket here just fits right where that little dry box goes and sits flat right against that surface where the opening. So what we'll do is just get it in place and go ahead and drill. I got a 1/4 inch bit here. I'm going to drill 2 holes right up here for the bolts to go through. So what I'll do is go ahead and drill both of them, and then we'll go ahead and put those bolts in it before we drill the bottom. That way it'll kind of hold it in place, make sure everything lines up a little better. Alright, got both holes in there, so what we're going to do is go ahead and put these bolts up through it. Now we've got to take this thing back off in order to put the radios in, obviously, but what I'm going to do is just stick these in there like so. That'll help me hold this thing in place to make sure the ones for the bottom lined up. There's 2 slots under here. There's horizontal and vertical slots, and what this is for is slots under this bracket that allow you to mount other units under here, whatever that may be. I'm going to use the 2 outside ones that run front to back. These actually we have to swap the bit out for to a 3/16 bit and then drill 2 holes under here. I'm going to have to do that off camera, obviously, because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to show this when it's so close to the floor down here. But I'm going to drill these 2 out, just get the holes done, and then we'll take this bracket back out, install the radios, and then put it back in here and bolt everything up. Alright, let's see about getting these units in here. The radio goes in the bottom slot. There's holes right in the side, holes in the bracket. 1 on this side, 2 on the other. I'm not sure the exact reason for that. I'm sure there is one, but these little black short Phillips screws are what go in here. We'll just kind of get them started before we tighten them all down. If you are regular on my how-to videos, you know that I'm a stickler for that. You never ever tighten down a single bolt that's going into something till you get them all in there first. Then you tighten them all down. Alright, so we'll go ahead and snug these up. A couple little clicks on the impact should be plenty. The intercom is going to be a little bit more tricky, and I'll show you why. These are the bolts that hold it in. What these actually do is go inside of these slots that go down each side of the intercom itself. They're a little tricky to get started. There's like a little plastic little lip right there. Once it gets in there, it slides back and forth pretty easy. But if you stick this in the hole, there's obviously no way you're going to assemble that. So what you actually have to do, sorry little handheld, let me get you out of the way, is get these into the holes that you want to use. I'm just going to go ahead and use the outer ones because that'll put it right about in the middle. Get them into the holes, and you have to put the intercom in from the front and begin to work it back, and then slide it up onto the bolts as you push it back into its mount. Like I mentioned, this is going to be a little bit tricky. I got that one started. You have to have them turn just right, the flat spots to the top and bottom for it to slide in. There we go. Okay, it's in there. Now we'll just slide it back so that it's roughly even with the radio here. Oops, wrong one. We'll put this little lock washer and this acorn nut on there. Get them both on there, and then we'll tighten them down. There's a 10mm that fits these. One final check to make sure it's even with the radio and where we want it. And just snug them up. Just like I said, a couple clicks on the impact, and that was more than enough. Alright, and then we look and make sure that we didn't mount them upside down, and we did not, so we are ready to put them in the dash. Now we're going to get these things installed. First we got to get them plugged in, of course. Your intercom and your radio just plug in right here together. Just make sure you get these pins lined up properly. Insert these 2 plugs and click them into place. That's our first connection made. I went ahead and cut that little tie wrap loose that I had bundling these together. Obviously you don't want all this crimped up, especially when you're trying to keep some wires away from 12-volt wires and such, but we'll go ahead and remove the protective plugs off the jacks we're going to be using back here. This one here is for the antenna itself. We'll take that off and get it out of the way. Now on the top of the intercom here, or on the back of the intercom I should say, it's marked driver, co-driver, and right here headsets, and on the bottom one is PTT for push to talk. So the headset wires that are going to your wired helmets will go into these 2 plugs, marked again driver, co-driver. Same thing for the push to talk buttons. We'll plug them into there. Now these 2 are if you wanted to run additional wires to the rear seats, whatever vehicle you're in. You can actually buy, I think, 22 foot, 24 foot long leads, something like that, off a Rugged's website. If you want to include the kids in the conversation, I may do that later on. It would actually be fun to be able to talk to them that way. But as of right now, we're just going to go with these. Now up here is an auxiliary port. Now what I'm actually going to use this for is you can hook a wire here that will allow you to output the voice comms coming through the intercom and record them to a device that would allow you to capture it, and I'm going to do that, and I'll show you why later. But the other thing you can do with it is you can import music into the unit to play through the headsets. So that's obviously, if you know me at all, you know I'm not listening to music out on the trails if I can help it. So this is, like I mentioned, an extension. If you need, for some reason, more than 4 headphone jacks, you can add another unit that would mount up under this bracket here, I suppose, and extend it out for more connections. But with all them out of the way, the only thing left to do is just plug all these wires in. I'm going to go ahead and stick the antenna wire in first. One thing I need to note on this, and I actually forgot earlier, is the Rugged Techs did suggest you put shrink wrap on the back of this plug to help seal it, but also to help give it a little bit more support. And on this end, the center conductor comes out of this end, and this end has to be crimped down. They also suggested that you solder the tip of this plug just to help seal it off. This is only recommended if you're using a waterproof radio, which I am, so I did. And we just plug this in, slide it down until it seats, and then tighten the connector down. Alright, with the antenna nice and tight here, we're going to just kind of grab the next wire. Identify it. This is going to that side of the RZR, and because of the wire and the plug, I know that this is the headset cord. We'll look for the co-driver. So we'll look for the co-driver side of the intercom. The headsets are toward the top. I don't know if you can see it in the video or in this camera here, but there's a little black button right on top of it. And it's a push button that releases this plug if you need to take it loose. On this top row, that actually faces up toward the top of the intercom. So we'll line that toward the top and gently insert the plug, and it snaps into place. Now I'll grab the next wire, just whichever one. Again, going to that side of the RZR, I can tell that this is the push-to-talk plug. Same thing, has a little release button, but these actually need to go down toward the bottom. So you get it toward the bottom, you can feel the plug kind of slide into place, and then it connects. This one is driver side, push to talk. You can tell, same type of plug. Point it down, snap it in place, and then we'll locate some more wires. We got 2 over here. This one has a tag on it. This is RAC, which is for record. So there's only one more. Going to driver side, so we know that's the headset plug. Point the release button toward the top and insert. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, this record cable is going to go over here to the auxiliary port. Plug it in. We've already got these 2 units connected. The only thing left is power. Kind of untangle everything here. Get these off to the side. These plugs are shaped in such a way they only go together one way, but triple check that you're putting red to red. You do not want to reverse this, even though it really doesn't let you, but still, it doesn't hurt to check. Alright, snap that in. The intercom now has power. Now we will do the same thing with the radio plug. A quick note, the radio plug, as you can see, is pretty well protected. The radio is a waterproof unit. The intercom technically is not waterproof. You need to be aware of that. They did say they've never really had any problems with it. It seems to be pretty durable. Doesn't really get any trouble from getting wet, but obviously you would not want to submerge it. And they did state that you probably don't want to just spray it, with a direct jet of water, like from a pressure nozzle on a water hose, or definitely not a pressure washer. But, just general splashes and things like that, it should be okay. Alright, so everything is connected. I'm just going to gently push these back in here. And before I put the dash back on, I'm going to reach down here and sort these wires out and make sure they're not tangled up, and maybe group them up a little better. But we'll just drop this in place and put our bolts in. Put this bolt on the top, grab a flat washer and stick on it. Put one of these little self-locking nuts on it. And like always, I'm just going to go ahead and get everything started, and I'll go back and tighten them up. Alright, for the bottom, one of the reasons I use these outside slots, other than just being a little more stable from being spread further apart, is that the other slots were actually under the radio here. These little bolts, while there's plenty of clearance, trying to reach behind the dash and get your hand up in there to put a flat washer and nut on this would be a little difficult given the clearance. So just go ahead and feed these up through the hole, and then reach back there and put the flat washer. It's almost like a fender type flat washer because you're actually tightening down on plastic. We'll put that on there, and then these little nuts, and then tighten all this down. Alright, we use a 7/16 box end here and socket. Get these tightened down. Now we switch over to a 5/16 socket and a 3/8 inch wrench. Tighten these bottom ones. These are smaller, so again, you don't really want to hammer down on this. I'm going to have to go to the other side to get that one, but as soon as we get that tightened up, we'll power it up. Alright, with everything tightened up and hooked up and good solid mount here, just press and hold this little green power button a couple seconds and power the radio on. Get rid of this light, maybe you can see it a little better. Right here at the top, you see, I don't know if you can read it, but it's a DC 12.8 volts, so it's actually a voltage reading right here on the radio, which would be handy, especially if you run a lot of electronics, light bars and such. Down here we got the channel. Right now it's on GM RS7. You can change the channel and the volume with the knobs here on the front. This will change the channel. This one, this side, will do the volume. You actually get a readout and an audible tone. And then this is where you plug in your handheld microphone. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the bracket for it right over here, and we'll hang it up and plug it in. Alright, we've got this little spring-loaded bracket here. A couple of self-tapping screws. As far as why I'm putting it right here is because it looked like a good spot. Now, you are using self-tappers in the plastic, so careful not to strip them out. Make sure it's lined up straight for aesthetic reasons. Put in the other screw. You can hang the microphone right there, and then plug this jack. There's an alignment mark on this plug. It's black, so probably hard to see, but it actually goes toward the left. And this also has a little rubber gasket in here to kind of seal this off. So we'll plug that in and tighten down that little lock nut. Let's see if we can go find somebody to give that handheld radio to and try this thing out. Alright, I went and gave him a little handheld over to my dad at his house. This isn't exactly a range test as so much as a let's make sure I hooked it all up right test. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're coming in loud and clear.
It works. Sweet. Alright, I said I wasn't really going to do a range test just yet, but I just can't help it. My dad's about to roll down the street using my little handheld, and I'm going to talk to him until he can no longer hear me. We'll see how far away he goes. I suppose you can still hear me now since you're right there.
Yep, I still hear you. You hear me now?
Yeah, nice and clear.
Oh, I'm still going then. Alright. 8, that's 8, almost 9/10. Alright, coming up on 9/10.
A little staticky, but I can still hear you just fine.
I can't understand what you're saying now.
Well, that's about the limit for this area.
You bring it up so bad I can't make you out now. But it's good for about a mile, looks like. That's pretty good.
Well, he has left our neighborhood, went out onto one of the main roads in the area, and went on down a good little ways, probably about a mile from here. A lot of trees, a lot of forested, a little bit of elevation change. And I still hear, he's a little staticky on this end, but I still hear him coming through just fine. So I would say that is working as advertised. Well, that wraps up part 2 of this installation series for my new Rugged Radios gear. We went over the wiring, installed the radio and intercom into the mounting bracket, and got the whole assembly hooked up and in the dash. We even had an impromptu operation and range test with my little 5-watt handheld. So stay tuned for part 3, where I'll be installing the helmet kits and giving the intercom and audio capture feature a test. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.